Hello, everyone. Lane Nordlund with the Western Ag Network coming to you live from the 2022 Angus Convention here at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City, Utah. We have thousands of producers on the registered and commercial end attending this year's event, and it is quite the trade show and all of the opportunities that are taking place here in Utah. Now, joining us here today from the state of Montana is American Angus Association board member Darrell Stevenson. And Darrell, it's always tough to take time away from the home operation, especially when you have a fall bull sale coming up very soon. But obviously your service to the board, a lot of activities going on here. But what is the purpose of the convention every single year?
Lane, thanks for the opportunity. You are right. It's tough to be away from home, but this is part of the dedicated service. It's an incredible honor for me to actually serve on the American Angus Association Board of Directors. This is an annual event, and for us, this is our main gathering place. It's our annual meeting, which will be conducted on Monday. Primarily for that, it will be the election of a new slate of directors, and there'll be a pretty big change this year. There's 7 candidates that are running for 5 new positions, and so it'll be a big turnover, which is critical not only for the Angus Association, its membership, but for the industry as a whole on what those future decisions will be made by this oncoming board.
Well, a lot of activities going on here this week, and I should mention, of course, our friends at AgRisk Advisors are bringing you the coverage from Utah this week. Make sure and visit them online at agriskadvisors.com and learn more about that pasture range and forage policy with the enrollment deadline coming up on December 1st. But Darrell, as we come here, yes, it's great to see people. It's great to have a coffee, have a beer, and catch up with producers from across the nation. But at the heart of this is creating a strong foundation for the future of the Angus breed, not only for purebred breeders, but for commercial cattlemen as well, and also grow beef demand.
Absolutely. This is a different setting than most conventions that you would probably attend to, because this is general policy and direction and the leadership that drives this organization. And as an example, for instance, we had some certified Angus beef board policy change that took place a few weeks ago, and last week those increased carcass weight sizes were implemented within the industry, and every packer in North America, the United States and Canada implemented them, and you saw a wave of change within 7 days that every other branded program chose to also do the same thing. So one small decision by this board and this organization from this breed impacted the entire beef industry in one decision. And so the policy and direction that comes out of these meetings and these board decisions is greatly affecting the entire cattle production population, not just the registered cattle. So in that, this is an extraordinary gathering place. I'm thrilled that it's in Salt Lake City. This is as close to Montana as it will actually get. At this point, I think we're between 1,300 and 1,400 registrants, which would be about average. We've got delegates from every state in the United States. And most people fly in, come in about Friday, and today there'll be a lot of workshops and educational, anything from educating from Angus Media to the Angus Genetics side of the subsidiaries that we work with. Obviously the camaraderie, the networking, the marketing for individual producers as well, and that leads into, like this afternoon, we'll have candidate forums and then caucuses for the political side as well.
Well, again, very busy activities going on down here, and as I mentioned, not just impacting the purebred Angus breeders out there, but also those cow-calf producers that are the heart of your business.
Absolutely.
What is a message that you have for the cow-calf producers, not only in Montana, Wyoming, or the West, but across the nation, about the importance of Angus genetics and helping improve that product that's going to be enjoyed by a consumer at the end of the line?
Well, you actually led this question into the exact foundation that we've always got to be looking at the end consumer, actually. And there's a couple landmark statements that need to be made over the last 2 or 3 years. To me, what was simply amazing was the ability for certified Angus beef to have the pull-through through COVID. And there was a blip in sales and overall marketing. but it was immeasurable compared to any other protein or any other brand that is actually available to the consuming public. And in that, we did prove that sales have now bounced. This is the sixth consecutive year that we've now sold over 1 billion pounds, 1.234 billion pounds in fact. Acceptance rate hovers between 35 and 36%. And more impressively to me than any other statement, this is the first time in history that it was actually statistically declared that over 70% of all harvested cattle in the United States is now black-hided. Now I emphasize black-hided is not Angus, and this is actually proven for what is qualifying actually for CAB. In the industry today, down to the production sector, there's only two premiums that you can capture, and they're very elusive. The ultimate is prime, second is CAB. You got to get to CAB first. You got to have the black hide. But simply put, black-hided cattle just can't get there. Off-colored breed cattle aren't getting there. And so it is more than proven the strength of registered cattle and the use of registered bulls. Statistically, we can prove it. We've got feedlots and packers represented here. They want more marbling, higher quality grading cattle with more performance. And you're not buying black cattle anymore. It's the predictability of what a registration paper can offer.
Well, again, a lot of conversations going down here, not only, as I mentioned, impacting Angus breeders, but also those commercial cattlemen and women out in the countryside that are dealing with so much drought, input costs, and just the ins and outs of the stress that go into being in agriculture production. Stay with us, friends. We're going to have a few more conversations about managing risk out on your operation and your livestock production, but also we're going to catch up with industry leaders like Joe Goggins and hear what he shared with all the attendees during the general opening session here at Angus Convention 2022. Again, this coverage brought to you by our friends at AgRisk Advisors. Returning back to Angus Convention 2022, we find ourselves at booth 647, just a few steps away from the demo arena with our friends at AgRisk Advisors, and they are bringing you this week's coverage. Joining us is Alex Anaya and Kevin Schlabach, and they are talking with cattlemen and women this week about the services that they provide producers out in the countryside, covering their hide, we can say, with those risk management solutions. And Alex, of course, a big talk right now and a big push is to remind producers about pasture range and forage insurance. That deadline is coming up December 1st. What is PRF, and how is that an opportunity for producers to, especially cow-calf producers, to manage that risk when it comes to a lack of rainfall and having a source to buy hay because of that?
Yep, absolutely. And you know, the biggest thing and the biggest risk that comes with any cow-calf operator these days, it is weather, right? I mean, you have lack of precipitation, you have dry years, your expenses are going to go up. So a lot of these guys, it's not enough anymore to just work 12, 13, 14-hour days and make some money. We have a lot of inherent risks that we've got to think about, and that's where the pasture rangeland forage program really comes into play. Lack of precipitation ultimately leads to drought at the end of the day, which is one of the biggest leading concerns. So with this program, being able to offset expenses and offset feed costs in a year where there's lack of precipitation, it gives cow-calf producers a leg up, I guess you can kind of say.
And as we look at these options, Kevin, a cow-calf producer could be out there saying, why do I need to do this? You know, it seems complicated. I don't know. How do I compare numbers? How do I pick a time frame of when we should look at the coverage rates? How does AgRisk Advisors present that to producers that, you know, are concerned about how they spend their money?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where picking a good agent and working with a good agent is really going to help that decision making. And here at AgRisk, what we like to do is we like to take our historical data that we have, combine that with long-range forecasts that we work with meteorologists on, and then also just talk with you as a producer. What are your needs? When do you need protection? When are you going to have that management decision of what do I need to do? Do I need to sell? Do I need to buy hay? And so that's the kind of formula that we're trying to take and really cater a program that's going to fit those needs around historical data, long-range forecasts, and the producer's needs.
Now, as producers are walking around the trade show, you have the ability to show them historical data through software. Is that correct? And say, you know what, this might be a prime time to create this policy and really walk them through, and they can have that hands-on and eyes on the screen when it comes to seeing what those options are and how it all works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're able to kind of take your information straight away. In my mind, that's the best way to look at something. It's only going to go so far if you talk about it, and I'm the type of person that likes to see everything that's going on. And a lot of people around here too, they kind of want to know what it can do for their operation. So, if somebody stops by and really wants to take a good hard look at things, I mean, take 30 seconds out of your day. Let's pull something up and let's show you how this program can benefit you.
Well, it's clear that these guys are not Jake from State Farm. They know the industry, they understand the livestock sector, and I think that's why producers do trust when they can work with knowledgeable experts out there when it comes to pasture range and forage. And I think one thing we should really hit, though, is especially across the West, producers have had to buy hay to try to keep their herds and their genetics coming together. How do the payments work when we're looking at pasture range and forage insurance?
So pasture range and forage, it's broken down on intervals, which are 60-day time periods. So every 2 months is an interval, and so as it worked through the interval, and we compare the historical average rainfall, and when you become underneath that index, it triggers a loss payment. And those loss payments are paid out at the end of each interval. So the idea behind the program is really to keep ranchers and farmers cash flow positive and making sure that they're getting that extra check or extra relief at the time it's needed and not at the end of the year when a program would expire.
Now, at the opening general session for Angus Convention, they had a panel of some heavy hitters in the Angus breed and in all sectors of the livestock business, and they all brought up LRP, livestock risk protection. And a lot of cow-calf producers are just starting to discover LRP, but how is this a way that they can hedge maybe that unborn calf, or maybe that calf that is 6 months old, as a way, that it's not just playing in the market, but you're actually putting a coverage on your animal to help cover those costs of the unforeseen circumstances of livestock production?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, I think LRP, livestock risk protection, I think it's a hidden gem. Because a lot of times, especially with cow-calf operators these days, a lot of them, they just don't meet certain requirements that you have to do if you're hedging on the board. A lot of these guys are taking a lot of risk and a lot of speculation when they're doing stuff like this. Through livestock risk protection, at the end of the day, it's an insurance program, and that's what's awesome about it. It's a little bit more flexible. It's subsidized through USDA and federal crop insurance already, minimum of 35%, maximum of 55%, which is huge, and it's just making it more affordable on the everyday individual producer. What's awesome about that is you've got some different categories when it comes to the type of cattle and the type of operation you are, especially as a cow-calf producer with that unborn calf. There hasn't ever been any time where you can actually insure or even have some type of price protection on an animal that hasn't even hit the ground yet. And that's where livestock risk protection on the unborn cattle side of things comes into play, because as markets are good, as you might be a spring calver and you're looking at forecasting that far out, well, if the prices are pretty high and you can lock something in on a cattle that's already, it's getting ready to be born in March or April or whatever you guys are, you have that price protection and you have that security up front already. And then as those are born, you can start taking that out a little bit further.
Now, Kevin, when you're out in the countryside with a producer on the cow-calf level, when they hear the words subsidize or insurance, they may be like, we're pretty proud of our operation, and we don't want to dive into handouts. Is it a handout or is it not? That I think this is our folks just want to know exactly what it is.
Well, and we get asked that question quite a bit because a lot of ranchers are pride themselves on making it and not taking handouts. And what I tell them is, no, it's not a handout, because you still are taking on a premium and you are still taking on a risk of owing a premium. So it is not a handout by any means. Now, it's subsidized through your farm bill dollars that are voted on and provided for programs like this. And most crop insurance, all crop insurance, is subsidized in some sort of way. So whether it's row crop, whether it's the PRF program we discussed earlier, it's all going to become funded through your farm bill dollars, and those dollars are there to help you. And I always like to go back of, I'd rather be using those dollars provided to farmers and ranchers, helping farmers and ranchers, than seeing those dollars sit on the table and be reallocated to some other cause or some other need that doesn't involve agriculture.
Well, and I encourage our friends that are listening and viewing this to visit AgRiskAdvisors.com to learn more about all they provide livestock producers in the countryside. And I know you're going to see Steve Wooten enjoy and their family on the promo videos, a great leader in the cattle business from Colorado and on the national level. But Alex, as that video shows, you guys are out in the country. You go to operations. I guess what's something that you would just like to tell producers watching or listening to this about your commitment to meeting them, to going out and seeing their operations and helping them make it through the next year and planning for the long term?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys are out, you're doing everything on a daily basis on your own. You're out living the ranching lifestyle. As part of that, as advisors, making sure that we know how your operation works on the ins and outs. It's great to see what you guys are doing on a daily basis. Making sure we go and see the operation, not because it's required of us or anything like that, but because it's more of a want and a need in our mind as advisors to just make sure, number one, let's see what you guys are doing. Let's talk about your risk program. Let's talk about everything that you've got going on with your individual operation. Heck, let's take a tour of it. In some of the videos, you see us driving around and just visiting, even on Steve's place too, just showing us everything that we got. And I think that's really crucial and important as an agent and as an advisor in general to just, build that reputation and build that rapport with your individual producer to make sure they know that you're really caring what they're wanting to do.
Well, again, Alex and Kevin, thanks for joining us here. And for our friends that are still maybe thinking about running down to Salt Lake, jump on that one-way flight into Salt Lake City or drive in. Come down here to the Salt Palace. Check out AgRisk Advisors at booth 647. They got some good giveaways, too. You might win a cooler. But make sure and stop by and see them. And we would just like to thank them for helping us bring you this coverage from the 2022 Angus Convention. Friends, stick around. We're going to have a recap of the general session that kicked off this year's event. A great lineup of panelists, some heavy hitters in the business that are optimistic about the future of the livestock industry. It's something you will not want to miss. Stay with us. We'll be back right after these words. As we return back to Angus Convention 2022 here on the Western Ag Network, brought to you by AgRisk Advisors. We have producers from across the nation gathered here this week at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City, Utah. And this morning, during the opening general session, attendees were very excited to hear from some very heavy hitters in the cattle industry and the Angus breed. One of those panelists of the industry forum was Mr. Joe Goggins out of Shepherd, Montana, and Joe joins us right now. And
it's
Joe,
great to be here.
Well, it's been a tough go for producers. Last time we talked was at, of course, one of the Northern Video Sales earlier this year. And what is your feeling as a producer, as a market owner, and also just as a father with kids that want to be in the business? How are things going here at the end of 2022?
Oh, I'm like I said this morning on the stage. I'm very bullish beef. I think we got some really nice and good years ahead of us. We continue to deplete this cow herd in this country, and mostly due to drought. And when the good Lord helps us with some moisture, and we grow some feed, and we figure out ways to kind of lessen these input costs and this and that, this thing gets good. I mean, it gets really good. I think it'll pale kind of what we got done in 2014. And I really think the key to this whole thing is inventory in the days ahead. For those of us that can stay the course and keep that core cow herd around us, I really believe our best days are ahead of us.
Now, a part of this panel, I think it was really great to be able to see the interaction with the crowd with the polls and the surveys, where producers were able to just right away on their phones give their reaction, their opinion on things. And that first poll of the question, the profitability in the cow-calf sector what people felt it was going to be like in the next 2 to 3 years, and 59% of attendees said it's going to improve slightly. As you mentioned, you think it's going to be more bullish, but what was it like to see that number from registered and commercial breeders alike out in the audience?
Yeah, it was pretty overwhelming, probably slightly moderate, and that's kind of where I would be too. I think our calves are going to bring more. We're going to, I think our yearlings, I think our product is going to bring quite a little more, but they have to. I mean, you look at what a baler costs, you look at what a swather costs, you look at what a corn chopper costs, you look at your fertilizer costs, your fuel. The input costs are astounding right now, and it's really, until we get the input costs under control, if we do, and this thing, and the cow herd goes to where we think that's going to go, it's unbelievable what could just happen days ahead.
Now, there is so many issues at hand right now. I had to go buy some dyed diesel from the co-op the other day, and I'm just like, I did not want to have to buy in bulk. But so I was just at the pump filling it up because I don't want to pay that high price. But so many producers are stocking up right here, looking for the year ahead. What is your advice for producers out there that are able to keep a portion of their herds together in drought country about making sure that genetics stays at the top of their mind when we look at bull sales here this fall and into the spring, and making sure that we're keeping genetics and performance at the top of everybody's mind through these hard times?
I think we've never seen a time, in my lifetime at least, that we've seen such a disparity between what a good one's worth and what one that's not so good's worth. And these feeders that are left, whether it be the corporates or the mid-range or the farmer feeders, we all know where the best ones are and the people that have done the best job. And it is so important, whether you're sitting there watching a video sale and watching them go across the screen, or sitting at an actual auction market and watching them come through the ring. It doesn't take very long to figure out who's kind of watching their genetics and their bull power, and there's such a difference. And we're coming into a time for those that kind of do their homework and do things right, and have some power and some consistency and some performance in these cattle. They're going to get paid for it.
And when we look obviously at the situation in the sale yard, we got the fall run going. The calf market has really strengthened up, I think, once we hit November as usual. But that spread on heifers and steer calves has come together. Maybe that took a little longer than some people thought. But in your opinion, do you think folks are thinking, you know what, we're getting a little moisture this fall. Maybe we buy those replacement quality heifers and try to feed them?
Yeah, someday they're going to have to breed a heifer again. They just have to. And we've seen that, especially in our August video where we feature the replacement heifer calves. But we've seen it for the first time in many years where these good replacement heifer calves are bringing, especially as replacement Angus heifer calves, they're bringing from the same as the steers, maybe $20 a hundred more. There's going to be some demand for these high quality replacement stock, and I think the money to be made in agriculture here in the next few years is going to be with this she stock, with these cattle that we can put on grass and cheapen up some of these inputs. I really think you're seeing, especially on the replacement heifer side, there's still some spread between these light heifer calves and these feeding heifers and the steers, and I think you'll continue to see that tighten.
Now, you mentioned earlier talking about just those opportunities to keep producers in business and really help that next generation go forward, and that margin has to be there. I think you brought up some really good points earlier today, but what are your tips out there for a young producer that has a job in town, or possibly the wife has a job in town, or vice versa, whoever's running the operation? Is it possible for a young producer to go out on their own and get a start out there? And if so, what support system do they need?
Yeah, it takes a lot of support system. I'm not sure a person that just coming in cold buys a ranch, buys the equipment, buys the cows. I think that is an impossible scenario anymore. And but I do think I think we as an industry, not just the Angus Association, but those of us involved in the beef industry, have better come forward and unify around some ideas as far as how can we create some margin to incentivize people not only to leave their land in food production, but to incentivize some young people to want to do this. And I think we can all agree about the only way we're going to get young people to continue to want to be involved in production agriculture is we got to create some more margin. Obviously, a $2 six-weight steer is not enough. I don't know if it's $3, I don't know if it's 3.5, but it's somewhere quite a ways above $2 to incentivize these young people to want to do this with the input costs and the environment that we live in. And I think there's some real promise coming forward on maybe trying to come up with some ways to incentivize people to leave their land, and especially protein production. When you look at the amount of acreage that we lose out of this country, thousands and thousands of acres out of production agriculture each and every year, I think it's a national security issue. I think if we continue to lose this acreage, we're going to lose our food independence. And when we lose our food independence in this country, where we have to import more than we produce ourselves, we are no longer a superpower. I mean, when you look at over history, our ability to trade on a world market has our number one bargaining chip, our big tool and toolbox for making these trade agreements on a world stage has not been our energy, it has not been our technology, it's been our food. And I think that's something that we need to tell the story to these, there's only 2% of us to tell it, but we need to tell this story to the citizenship of the United States, to the importance of our position here in this country and feeding this populace.
So when you're at the Pays Cafe and sitting around with some producers of all ages, what are some of the ideas that get surfaced about keeping land in ag production? Because it's pretty appealing when 60, 70-year-old kids that haven't been back to the farm or ranch in 40, 50 years, and mom and dad pass away, or the neighbors are leasing that land, and that range land, it could be worth $2,000, $4,000 an acre just a range land. We know that doesn't pencil.
Yes.
Raising cattle. What are some ideas that we can do to incentivize the legislation, tax incentives to be able to come together and say, hey, if you keep this in ag production, sell that to the neighbor, sell it to a young producer? Do you think that's possible? Do you think Congress can do that?
I do. I think if we unify around it, we have to come at it with one voice on that. I mean, it's got to be a grassroots movement, and I'm not saying it's got to be exactly that, but these are the conversations we need to have, I think, if we're going to make this work. I'm not sure all of these conversations we're having about fed cattle marketing, and all of these conversations about the beef checkoff, and all of these conversations about country of origin labeling. Some of us really believe in some of those things. Some of us really don't believe in some of those things. They're very diverse and divisive topics within this industry that we are never going to find any common ground on. So I think the conversations we need to have are the kind of the ones like you and I are having right now, as far as how can we create margin, how can we create incentive, and some of the ideas are thrown around just to kind of build off of, because we all agree there's a problem with margin, and basically the one that I think is kind of doable that can be built off of, not exactly this way, but if you decide to transfer your land to the next generation, and that generation agrees to leave that land in production agriculture, in food production for 15 years, kind of base it off of a conservation easement model, then that generation would be exempt from any death or inheritance tax. And I realize some people don't have to worry about that because they wouldn't have a large enough estate to worry about it. But for those that do, which is a lot of them, that have really a lot of us that own these ranches, the only really wealth we have is in our land. And it's just so unfair that next generation has to buy that land again. And if we could get into situations like that, it would create a lot of margin for a young person to want to kind of maybe take this thing on and want to try it.
Now, one thing that you were talking about earlier is risk management and utilizing tools like livestock risk protection. And we were just talking with our friends at AgRisk Advisors that a lot of cow-calf producers don't understand or know about LRP. Maybe they're worried about it because cattle producers, we're very proud of how hard we work. We don't want handouts. But looking at a risk management tool, how important is it for producers of all sizes to look at LRP?
You know, I think it's a very useful tool. I mean, in our own operation, we've started to use it, and it's been especially in what I think the market structure looks like now, to where we sure have some possibilities of going higher. It at least allows you to get a floor, and it allows you to protect against what they call these black swan events. And for us, the part that really intrigues me most about it is there's no margin calls, and you don't have to pay any of it up front. You pay it after you sell the cattle. At the end, the misconception that a lot of people might have is that it's a true form of margin. It's a true form of it's risk management. It's an insurance policy, and to be honest, it's not a cheap one. I mean, if you get the higher end of it, it's going to cost you $50-$60 a head. But for those of us in this thing, we can live with a $40-$50 loss over some times. Can't live with that $500-$700 loss, and that's what it protects against. And I think it allows these people to. For a cow-calf producer to have the ability, when the market's so good right now, to tie up his unborn calves right now at say $1,100 to $1,200, not a bad gamble. Not a bad gamble.
Now, I know you got to get running here. We don't want to take too much more of your time, but you made a comparison this morning about beef and beer. Do you want to reshare that?
Oh, we hear a lot of talk anymore on the news, this and that, about inflation and recession. And my father always told me there was two things in the world that are recession and inflation proof, and that's beer and beef.
Well, one thing about it, I like a consistently good tasting beer. I'm a Coors Light man myself, and I love one of those certified Angus beef ribeyes along the way. But Joe, before we get kicked off by our announcer here on the intercom, just any last comments you'd like to share with your fellow Angus breeders or the commercial cowman out there?
Yeah, no, it's. I think we're into some real exciting times ahead of us. I do. I think all of us are so sick of negativeness and the bad things in this world, and there is so much to look forward to, and there's so much hope ahead of us for what's about to happen. And I think the key is own these cows, keep them around. You do the best you can to keep that core cow herd, because there's no question we got some good days ahead of us.
Well, again, Joe Goggins joining us here at Angus Convention 2022. Make sure and continue to follow along with us as we provide coverage here on social media and, of course, on our Western Ag Network radio and television programs throughout the week. Visit us online at westernagnetwork.com and like us on Instagram and Facebook. We'll have more from Angus Convention 2022 here on the West.